Join Alex Cardinale as he discusses America's worst tragedies and emergencies. Join Alex Cardinale as he discusses America's worst tragedies and emergencies. He will keep it real with you and share all the details about the emergency, how it could have been prevented, what we can learn from it, my thoughts and more. Tragedy can strike at any moment. Whether it's a fire, a medical emergency or robbery, we should be prepared for it. Learn from these common tragedies. Post your thoughts in the comments. Now here is Alex Cardinale.
Hello everyone! Welcome to a special crossover edition of Keeping It Real with me, Alex Cardinale. Today's episode is going to feel like a crime show. That's why this episode is being considered a crossover of Keeping It Real with Alex Cardinale and On the Case with Detective Alex Cardinale. Because the case that we're going to talk about is both a tragic case and also a criminal case. It did rock America, and it did shock America very, very much. Now, airplane hijackings don't happen all the time, and when they do, they make news headlines. Hijackers aren't always as successful with hijacking airplanes. Unfortunately, on September 11th, 2001, three hijackers were successful, but the fourth one was overcome and did not reach their intended target. So today's case is like that fourth hijacker, except this hijacker was an American and he was an employee for the airline. And he was disgruntled because he was about to be terminated and he wanted to get even with the company he worked for. And he also wanted his family to collect $2.5 million on his insurance policy. So he figured, you know what? I'm going to board the plane that I work for, the company's plane that I work for. I'm going to bring some weapons with me. I'm going to take over the cockpit and attack the crew. And then I'm going to make it look like an accident, and I'm going to crash the plane on purpose so that I could die and my family collects the $2.5 million life insurance policy that he had. And that was his plan with this hijack. So we're going to learn all about it tonight here on Keeping It Real with Alex Cardinale. So, on April 7th, 1994, FedEx employee Auburn Calloway boarded Flight 705. His plan was to kill the crew with a hammer and a spear gun, hijack the plane, and crash it to kill himself and give his family his insurance policy money, which was $2.5 million. So, if you're watching this video, make sure you share your thoughts on this case in the comments. So let's go ahead and get this show started. And here is what to know about this case. Some important information to know about this case. 3 flight crew members were in the cockpit on this flight. They included 49-year-old Captain David G. Dave Sanders, who had worked for FedEx for 20 years and previously served with the U.S. Navy for 9 years during the Vietnam War. It also included 42-year-old First Officer James M. Jim Tucker Jr., who had worked for FedEx for 10 years and previously served with the U.S. Navy for 12 years during the Vietnam War, and People Express Airlines for 3 years. And finally, it included 39-year-old flight engineer Andrew Andy Peterson, who had worked for FedEx for 5 years. Those are the 3 crew members that were on the plane. They were in the cockpit, and they were the ones who were severely attacked. Also in the airplane was 42-year-old FedEx flight engineer Auburn Calloway, an alumnus of Stanford University and a former Navy pilot and martial arts expert who was facing possible dismissal, firing, termination over falsifying of his flight hours. To disguise the hijacking as an accident so his family would benefit from his United States insurance policy, which was $2.5 million, which is equivalent to $4.6 million in 2022 life insurance policy. Calloway intended to murder the flight crew using blunt force. To accomplish this, he brought on board 2 claw hammers, 2 club hammers, a spear gun, and a knife, which was not used, concealed inside a guitar case. He also carried with him a note written to his ex-wife, and in the note it described his apparent despair. He was desperate, ladies and gentlemen, because he knew once he got fired, he would lose his money. He would lose the money to pay for his kids and his family. He knew his life was screwed. So he felt like this is the only thing he had to do to provide for his family, and it was to kill and murder 3 crew members in the cockpit, then crash the plane, kill himself, and his family gets $2.5 million from his life insurance policy. But what he wasn't counting on was the 3 crew members being veterans of the Army and Navy, and they were able to protect themselves, and they were able to land the plane safely and get Auburn arrested. Unfortunately, they did suffer some serious injuries, but they did survive. Just before the flight, Calloway had transferred over $54,000, which is equivalent to $98,000, $98,700 in 2022 in securities and cashier's checks to his ex-wife. So before the flight took off, he had sent all the money he had, which was $54,000, to his wife. So his family did get some money prior to the attack that happened on Flight 705. So his wife or his ex-wife must have had some inkling that this was going to happen. She had to know he was going to do something crazy, and you have to wonder, did she take the money as hush money and pretend like this never was going to happen? Maybe she knew it was going to happen. It didn't do anything because Auburn gave her money. You have to wonder that. Did she do that? Or did Auburn not tell why he gave all the money? Who knows? That's always going to be a mystery to me. So before takeoff, as part of his plan to disguise the intended attack as an accident, Calloway attempted to disable the cockpit voice recorder by pulling its circuit breaker to interrupt CVR power. However, during the standard pre-flight checks, Peterson, the flight engineer, noticed the pulled breaker and reset it before takeoff, reactivating the CVR. However, if Calloway succeeded in killing the crew members with the CVR still on, he would have simply have had to fly for 30 minutes to erase any trace of a struggle from the CVR's 30-minute loop. So that is what to know about this case. Now let's learn about the crime and the tragedy that took place. Let's hear about the attack. Very, very sad that this happened in 1994. So, 26 minutes after takeoff, as the plane was passing 19,000 feet and the flight crew carried on a casual conversation, Calloway went into the back to get his weapons, entered the flight deck and the cockpit, and attacked Peterson, Tucker, and Sanders. All three members of the crew received multiple hammer blows. Both Peterson and Tucker, the first officer, suffered fractured skulls, and Peterson's temporal artery was severed. The blow to Tucker's head drilled shards of bone into his body, or excuse me, into his brain, and initially rendered him unable to move or react, but he was still conscious. So Tucker, part of his bone went into his brain because of how hard he was hit with a hammer. That sounds very painful and very fearful and very scary. I can imagine what these three crew members were thinking, seeing that and feeling that. It must have been horrifying, to say the least. Captain Sanders reported that during the beginning of the attack, he could not discern any emotion from Calloway, just simply a face in his eyes. When Calloway seized his hammer attack, Peterson and Sanders began to get out of their seats to go after Calloway. Smart thinking that likely saved their lives. Calloway left the cockpit and retrieved his spear gun. He came back into the cockpit and threatened everyone to sit back down in their seats. Despite a loud ringing in his ear and being unbalanced and dazed, Peterson grabbed the gun by the spear between the barbs and the barbel. Tucker then put the DC-10 into a sharp 15-degree climb, and a lengthy struggle ensued, while Tucker, also an ex-Navy pilot, performed extreme aerial maneuvers with the craft. He pulled the plane into a sudden 15-degree climb, throwing Sanders, Peterson, and Calloway out of the cockpit and into the gallery. To try to throw Calloway off balance, Tucker then turned the plane into a left roll, almost on its side. This rolled the combatants along the smoke curtain onto the left side of the gallery. Eventually, Tucker had rolled the plane almost upside down at 140 degrees while attempting to maintain a visual reference of the environment around him through the windows. Peterson, Saunders, and Calloway were then pinned to the ceiling of the plane. Calloway managed to wrench his hammer hand free and hit Saunders in the head again. Just then, Tucker put the plane into a steep dive. This pushed the combatants back to the smoke curtain, but the wings and elevators started to flutter. At this point, Tucker could hear the wind rushing against the cockpit windows. At a speed of 460 knots, which is 530 miles per hour, the plane's elevators fluttered so much that the control surfaces became unresponsive due to the disrupted airflow. This lack of control tested the aircraft's safety limits. Tucker also began to sense a Mach tuck effect as the airflow over the wings approached the speed of sound. Tucker realized the throttles were at full power, increasing the speed of the aircraft. Realizing his only usable hand to pull back the throttles to idle, he managed to pull the plane out of the dive as it slowed down. As the DC-10 leveled off at 5,000 feet, Calloway managed to hit Sanders again while the struggle continued, and this time the blow nearly knocked him unconscious. Saunders was losing strength, and Peterson was bleeding out from his ruptured temporal artery and was starting to go into shock. In spite of his diminishing strength, Sanders managed to grab the hammer out of Calloway's hand and attacked him with it. When the plane was completely level, Tucker alerted Memphis Center, telling them about the attack and requesting a vector back to Memphis. He requested an ambulance and armed intervention, meaning he wanted a SWAT team to storm the plane, FBI and police. So smart thinking was done on Saunders. Smart thinking was done by Tucker, calling the Memphis Center, telling them about the hijacking and the attack, and requesting ambulance and police presence. The flight crew eventually succeeded in restraining and disarming Calloway, although only after moments of inverted and overspeed flight beyond the design capabilities of a DC-10. Sanders took control, and Tucker, who by then had his sense of touch severely diminished and was paralyzed on the right side of his body, went back to assist Peterson in restraining Calloway. Sanders communicated with air traffic control, preparing for an emergency landing back at Memphis International Airport. Meanwhile, during this time, Calloway started fighting with the crew again. He was determined to kill them. Fully laden with fuel and cargo, the plane was approaching too fast and too high to land on the scheduled runway 9. Due to the plane's weight, speed, and height, it was a risk of breaking up upon landing under these conditions. Sanders requested by radio to land on the longer runway 36L. Ignoring warnings from the ground proximity warning system and using a series of sharp turns that further tested the DC-10 safety limits, Sanders landed the jet safely on the runway at 35,000 pounds over its maximum designed landing weight. By the time the plane landed, fortunately, Calloway was defeated. He could not fight them no more. Emergency personnel and police gained access to the plane via the escape slide and ladder. Inside, they found the interior of the galley and cockpit covered in blood. Calloway was then arrested, taken off the plane, and along with Peterson, Tucker, and Sanders, was taken to a nearby hospital. Thank God Auburn Calloway's attempted hijacking failed. Thank God he failed to kill 3 innocent crew members. Thank God he did not injure or kill anybody, and thank God his plan failed, and thank God his family did not get $2.5 million in his life insurance policy in a awful act like this. Thank God he failed. So what was the aftermath of this attempted hijacking? Well, the crew of Flight 705 survived the attack, but they were seriously injured. The left side of Tucker's skull was severely fractured, causing motor control problems in his right arm and right leg. Calloway had also dislocated Tucker's jaw, attempted to gouge out one of his eyes, and stabbed his right arm. Saunders suffered several deep gashes in his head, and doctors had to sew his right ear back in place. Flight engineer Peterson's skull was fractured and his temporal artery severed. The aircraft itself incurred $800,000 worth of damage. Calloway pleaded temporary insanity, but the judge did the right thing. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, and federal sentences are not subject to parole. So, therefore, Auburn Calloway will never see the light of day again, and thank God the judge made the right decision. If this man is willing to hijack a plane, attack and kill 3 innocent crew members, and then crash the plane, causing more damage to the United States of America, he does not deserve freedom. This man should live and die in prison for his stupid actions, because his actions changed the lives of the crew members of Flight 705. Yes, the crew members might have survived, but their lives were forever changed because of some stupid idiot's actions, because he was going to be fired for lying. And it was terrible. So, anyway, Calloway was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, and he was sentenced on August 11th, 1995, for attempted murder and attempted air piracy. 1 month after the attack, on May 26, 1994, the Airline Pilots Association awarded Dave Saunders, James Tucker, and Andy Peterson the Gold Medal Award for heroism, the highest award a civil pilot can receive. As of 2004, 10 years after the incident, and due to the extent and severity of their injuries, none of the crew had been recertified as medically fit to fly commercially. However, James Tucker returned to recreational flying in his Luscombe 8A by 2002. The plane that was involved in this tragedy is still in use, but only for a few months. The plane that was involved in this tragedy will be retired by December of 2022. So there you have it. There is the case of the Federal Express Flight 705 hijacking. What are my thoughts on this case? Well, first of all, I am very thankful that the 3 crew members survived the attack, and that this plane was not crashed, and that there was no successful hijacking. I am very thankful that they were able to subdue Auburn Caldwell and get him arrested and get him in jail for the rest of his life where he belongs. My overall thoughts are, no matter how much you love your job, whether you're making a lot of money, whether you're lying to your boss and you're caught and you're going to get fired, there is no explanation for trying to take people's lives and then kill yourself just so your family gets money. Auburn Calloway was a sick, devious man who did not care for anyone but himself and his family, and he was willing to kill people just so that he wouldn't get fired and his family would be financially taken care of. But what Auburn didn't realize is actually he brought disgrace to his family. He disgraced his family, because now Calloway family will always be remembered as the family where Auburn failed his suicide plan, and he got owned by those 3 crew members. Sure, they suffered severe injuries, but look who's still alive, and look who still has their freedom. And I'm glad that the 3 crew member fought back and they beat up Auburn Calloway in the process. They defended themselves, and thankfully they were not charged for defending themselves against Auburn Calloway. All right. That is this week's episode of Keeping It Real with Alex Cardinale. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure to talk about the Federal Express Flight 705 hijacking. I saw this, ironically, on a YouTube video looking at some of the tragedies that happened in America, I saw this video and I said, you know what, it would be a great episode because I could combine my crime show and my tragedy show with it and do it. And it was a really good show. I had a good time talking about it. So thank you everybody for watching, whether you watch the show live or you're watching a replay of this show. I appreciate your view. If you like the video, be sure to leave a like. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're a new viewer, my YouTube channel is the legendary Alex Cardinale. The next episode of Keeping It Real, I'm going to talk about tragedies at amusement parks. We'll talk about some death that occurred at amusement parks on the next episode of Keeping It Real with Alex Cardinale. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next episode of Keeping It Real with Alex Cardinale. It's Crazy Tiger Alex Cardinale, and I am hosting the Halloween 2022 Bash. I'm inviting all you scary ghosts, goblins, and monsters, to be a part of the Halloween 2022 Bash hosted by me, Crazy Tiger Alex Cardinale. On the Halloween Bash this year, there will be appearances from Chef Alex and Aqua Alex Cardinale. What cooking recipes will Chef Alex give out? What monster fish will Aqua Alex talk about on the Halloween Bash? There will also be Halloween discussion and scary stories with Crazy Tiger Alex Cardinale. Crazy Tiger Alex Cardinale will also discuss his favorite cat, tigers, and tiger attacks on humans. So it's going to be a fun Halloween bash this year, filled with Halloween stories and a lot of Halloween fun. The Halloween 2022 bash airs live Halloween night, Monday, October 31st, 2022, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, only on my YouTube channel, the legendary Alex Cardinale. Happy Halloween, everybody, and I will see you Halloween night, Crazy Tiger Alex Cardinale. It's going to be great.